Hey everyone, you're listening to Party Time, My Golf Story with Kevin Walsh and whatever special guest he has today. You can check me out on episode 9 of the podcast. Today I'm wearing Grayson clothes while I'm out practicing because I believe in look good, play good. And follow me on Instagram, Sophia Warren Golf, and hope you enjoy the rest of the show.
It's Party Time, My Golf Story, brought to you by Party Drinks. Classically designed golf drinks for golfers by golfers. And the golf real estate pros Gene Walsh and Vince Visicaro. For your Southwest Florida real estate needs, check them out at suncoastdreams.com. Now here's your host, Kevin Walsh.
Hey, welcome to the program. We have another good show for you today. We have Kelly Elbin. He is the podcast host of Musings on Golf. And if you really like interesting guests and good conversation revolving around golf, then give it a try. This is a first for us, a podcaster interviewing another podcaster, talking about what our goals are with our podcast. I've been upfront with you in the past. What we're trying to get at with It's Party Time, My Golf Story, is we want to get to the core of golfers, find out what makes them tick. We want to recreate like Oprah's couch, if you will. And Kelly Elbin has been around the block. In many ways, he was born into the game, was the former communications director for the PGA of America. He's done a lot of things in life. He is very well connected. He's caddied for some of the greatest golfers of all time, Lee Trevino. That's a hint. I thought I'd also give you an update on the business. We're still not on YouTube right now because we got kicked off for reasons we don't quite exactly know. But I will tell you, whatever it was not untoward. This is a golf podcast. What could we possibly talk about that gets you in a bit of trouble? But we're still on Spotify, Apple, and other listening programs. Do me a favor, like the podcast, leave a review, and subscribe to it, because that certainly helps us in the best of ways. Big thanks to our title sponsors, Party Drinks. If you're looking for a golf alternative or a drink alternative on the golf course and you're a little tired of beer or things that are named after crustaceans or times of the day, try a Party. For golfers by golfers. Got a bunch behind me right there. I think you'll like what you have there. And also the golf real estate pros, suncoastdreams.com. If your dream is to live in the Southwest Florida area, there's no better place than Lakewood Ranch in the Sarasota area, then contact Gene Walsh and Vince Visicaro from suncoastdreams.com, a division of Fine Properties, and they'll get you all set up. All right. So enough of the stuff. Of that stuff, that's the housekeeping. That's the preamble, Kelly. You know how it goes. You run a podcast. You got to take care of a couple things before you get down to the nitty gritty. But how you doing, my man? And where are you joining us from?
Hey, Kevin, this is a real treat, man. Thank you for having me on. I'm doing great. I am in the beautiful city of Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, where I've lived for more than 20 years now. It's where the PGA of America used to be headquartered. They have since moved to Frisco, Texas. But I got to tell you what, man, I grew up outside of Washington, D.C. in Bethesda, Maryland, still call it home. But this is a tough area to move away from. It's beautiful. I live and a member at a private club here, play a lot of golf, great people. It's just one of those areas in northern Palm Beach County where a lot of people are moving to, and it's tough to want to leave. So therefore, I'm staying.
You just kind of told my story. I've been here on the other coast. We would say it's the better coast. I don't know if that's true, but it works for me.
Yeah.
I live on a golf course too. I've been here 3 years, and looking back, it took a series of events really to get me here, COVID being the tipping point more than anything. But
sure.
I look back and said, God, I wish I had have done it sooner. And I think a lot of other people feel that way. But take me back to the old neighborhood, Bethesda. Tell me about the street you grew up on. What was life like back then?
It was great, to be honest with you. I'm 63 years old now. Growing up in the late 60s, early 70s on Barnum Road, Barnum, like Barnum and Bailey Road in Bethesda, Maryland. It was great. I still cherish those times playing touch football with my buddies Tim Malloy, Gregor Howard, Kevin Howard, his brother. It might have been an elbow or two thrown here and there, but playing baseball at Our Lady of Mercy Catholic School, playing in a little bit of golf because, I was, as you mentioned, I was really born into it. But nothing against the era today in terms of social media and so forth, but it was really true, at least for my life, Kevin, in that I got to experience those interactions and with friends in the neighborhood, and just really growing up and also playing a lot of golf. I also caddied when I reached a certain age, so it was pretty good. And it really was all because of the hard work from my parents, Max and Mary Elbin, who made our lives great. I'm the youngest of 5 kids, and very fortunate, very lucky guy in so many ways.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I wanted to get into that too. You mentioned your dad. I want to talk about him. He was the longtime head pro at Burning Tree Club in suburban Washington. One of the greatest head covers in all of golf, because I know what it is exactly. And it also reminds me of the Heat Miser from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Yes. Remember that character? It yes. looks just like that.
Yeah.
What is that place like? Fill in the blanks for me. I don't know, but I have some guesses.
I caddied at Burning Tree Club in Bethesda, Maryland for about 12 years. It's a men's club. And, there are a few of those still around. I can't relate to the others, but I can tell you at Burning Tree, it was certainly unique. I mean, you would have guys playing without any shirts on. I never really saw too much more than that as far as any crazy stuff in the locker room, guys, walking around naked. I can't speak to that. But I can speak to the fact that it was a very understated place filled with lots of high-profile people. For example, my father taught presidents of the United States from President Eisenhower through the first President Bush. You had all your Washington area powers, if you will, all your government leaders at that time at a men's club. In the 70s, I started caddying when I was, I think, 13, so 73, 74. At that time, it wasn't as big a deal as it would become. You don't dare have a president of the United States playing at an all men's club today. But the way that I was treated, certainly as a caddy, and the way that everyone out there, it was really an escape, right? It was a place for people who had really important jobs, governmental jobs, to get away for 4 or 5 hours, no tee times, to come out, play with their buddies, have a drink, play some cards, have a little lunch. They didn't have dinners except for maybe a member guest. They didn't really have breakfasts except on the weekends. It was just golf on a really nice, friendly golf course, if you will, that came about because the members at places like Congressional Country Club, they didn't want to necessarily play those hard golf courses. And Burning Tree was an outstanding layout, just a really cool experience.
Kelly Elbin is our guest. He is the host of Musings on Golf. He's had a life in golf, beginning with his dad. I never knew your dad, but you said he started caddying even younger than you did. And where I think maybe you and I started caddying for something to do to have some extra pocket change, it was more real for him, wasn't it?
Very much. Kevin, we all have our heroes, right? And I think we can look at heroes in the sports world and so forth. But my hero certainly was my dad for so many reasons. My dad started caddying in the mountains of Western Maryland at Cumberland Country Club. He was 9 years old when he started, and he, for various reasons, was the main breadwinner in his family at that time. And that will certainly put you in a position of responsibility. And he went on from there, learned to play the game at Cumberland Country Club, and then eventually turned professional as a PGA of America member. But the one thing that my dad carried on when he started at Burning Tree was a caddy program. It was very important to him. So when I say that I caddied at Burning Tree and others, whether young schoolboy guys or older guys, there was a training program that was in place, because when you're caddying at a place like that, you sure as heck better know what you're doing. You sure as heck better know how to treat people. And my dad was really, I don't know if he was a pioneer necessarily, but the value of a caddy and how he treated people and how the members should treat caddies and vice versa was paramount to my dad.
I talked with Tom Coyne about this, the author of many books, including A Course Called America, A Course Called Scotland, A Course
always a good
Called
writer.
Ireland.
Yeah.
Such a good writer and one of the really interesting people in life. And we talked about our caddy experiences as young men, even before we were teenagers. I started when I was 12. And I think we had the same story in that we were exposed to grown men, maybe a grittier side of life and everything.
Yeah.
So it was a way to grow up faster and kind of see how everybody lived, the other side lived. Was that your experience too?
Somewhat. This is what I will say. A couple of things. One, and you see things in perspective later on. I was able to spend 4 hours with some very powerful people, people who others would have paid good money to have had the ear of those people for an hour. I spent 3.5, 4 hours with those people, and they paid me, right? And the exercise, as you well know, Kevin, on a golf course, the rolling hills of a place like Burning Tree. But yeah, also the second part for me, and I know for a lot of my peers, if you will, was that those interpersonal skills that you develop, man. I mean, you're exactly right. I got to, I gained confidence. I felt more comfortable because I was around older people. And I think that has helped me immensely throughout my life, and that ability simply to communicate and be comfortable and not be, feel like an outsider in any way when it comes to communicating with whoever the audience may be.
Same for me. I can go up to anybody at an airport, at a cocktail party, and just start talking.
Yeah.
And my kids look at me like I'm from Jupiter or something. Like, why are you talking to them? They don't want. And I'm like, you know what? Saying hello to people, asking them how their day going is a heck of an icebreaker. You never know where that's going to lead. And then the caddying opportunity then leads to other opportunities for you when you have to start working other jobs and everything. You have all that training to fall back on, don't you?
You do. I could give sort of a modern example. My son, Ryan, is 24, and Ryan worked at a club down here in Palm Beach Gardens, Mirasol, the golf club in Mirasol, 36-hole facility, very high-end place. And Ryan, while he grew up in golf, he really got to know and become comfortable with people and learn those interpersonal skills working on the range and bag drop for about 4 years at Mirasol. He is at 24. He's doing extremely well in the business world, very good in sales, very confident. My daughter, I would say the same way. Megan is 29. She went to she was in an art school effectively, and she was a really good singer. And while she hasn't taken that on and pursued that in her career, it has given her great confidence in what she does in her daily work. So, yeah, I just think there's so much value that comes with that. I think any time that you're around people, and certainly, Kevin, people who are, where you have to sort of be maybe a little bit more buttoned up, it's going to serve you well throughout your life.
Yeah, no question about it. You got to read the room as a caddy. You know who you can joke with and push it. Yeah. Maybe mix the language up a little bit, put a little more color in. And then there are others that just straight business. They just don't mess around. They're into their golf. I know some of those. I've been on the bag with them before. When did you first have a club in your hand, and who put it in your hands?
Yeah, it was my dad. I was probably 5 or 6 years old. Now, one thing to keep in mind. So my dad was at Burning Tree, a men's club. So I was very fortunate. He was also, I think my parents were charter members at Bethesda Country Club, where I kind of across the street from where I grew up from. I could see the club when I was a kid, but there are a lot of houses now between my old house and Bethesda Country Club. But it was my dad giving me lessons and just, as a teacher, he was very simple in that he never wanted to. He would always ask me, Am I telling you too much, Kelly? Am I confusing you at all? But my dad had about 25 assistant professionals who worked for him who went on to become head professionals at facilities throughout the country, and one of whom was a guy named Jim Folks, who was the head professional for many years at Bethesda. And Jim was a big influence in my life from an instruction standpoint. I spent more time there playing because I couldn't play necessarily at Burning Tree. When I caddied there, I would play on Mondays, but that was the extent of it. But, I was very fortunate to be around him and exposed to a lot of really, really good, great PGA of America golf professionals who, and it's still today, they care deeply about the game. And you probably have heard this, this, Kevin, they're the backbone of the game, right? It's cool. You see what Michael Block did last year at the PGA Championship at Oak Hill, and that was a great story. And it really, I think, elevated the perception, if you will, of the PGA of America golf professional. But they're the ones day in and day out who run the game, who grow the game, et cetera. The top merchandisers, the top, from a rule standpoint, they're the cornerstone of the game.
It's almost an around the clock job, and I think that's what a lot of people don't realize. I've been lucky to be friends with people whose fathers were head pros, and it was not uncommon for Dad to get up at 3:30 in the morning to kind of get himself ready for the day and be in work at 6 o'clock. And then there are the pressures of you're sort of the gatekeeper as a head pro. It's harder than people realize, isn't it? And my follow up to that is, it's not always easy on the family, is it?
You're right on both. I would say the first, I can only speak again for my dad, but man, you better check your ego at the door every day when you go into work. You're there to serve the members. And that might sound very old school. I don't know if that applies as much. I think it does, knowing outstanding golf professionals like Bob Ford, who recently retired, a few years ago at Seminole and was also at Oakmont for many years. They live by that credo. But you better check that ego because you're there to take care of the needs of your members. And those who do it well will last a long time. My dad was the head professional at Burning Tree Club for 50 years, 1946 to 1995. And that's a very long time. But he understood, you're talking about reading the audience and so forth. He knew what mattered. He needed to be visible. He needed to be there. And yeah, I think that's a real challenge from a family standpoint. As I mentioned, I'm the youngest of 5, and a lot of weekends my dad wasn't there.
Yeah. For you, though, did you feel like you were under a bit of a microscope and had to behave better than the rest?
Somewhat. Yeah, a little bit. Good question. A little bit. But I will say this, I never felt that I was Max Elbin's son when I was caddying. I was on the caddy bench. I don't know that I was ever, I caddied for Vice President Dan Quayle once. I caddied for Vice President, the first President Bush once, but it wasn't like, hey, Kelly, you're going to be getting the bag of the day. No, I think there might have been somewhat of a microscope to a degree, but I was just myself, and I blended in well. I've sort of been that way throughout a good deal of my life. I'm a easygoing person and blend in well with a lot of people. And I think that's important because if you're not, Kevin, if you throw the Max Elbin son card at people, that's not good at all. But I do think that's certainly from people have asked me, did you ever want to turn professional? You ever want to become a PGA member?
Yeah, and let's get into that.
Out of great respect for my dad, the answer always was no, because I want to have my weekends. I want to be able to actually maybe play the game on Saturday and Sunday or be with my kids, what have you, because my dad was working. He just was. That's what he did. That's what his identity was. And I completely understood that. But that's what, at that era, that's what mattered, to earn money, work your rear end off, provide for your family, provide for their educational opportunities. And that's what my parents gave me. And Max and Mary Elbin were unbelievable parents to me and to my siblings.
Good for you. can we get into the Dan Quayle golf? How good was he?
He was really good. He played a lot out there. Yeah, he played a lot of golf out there. As a matter of fact, you might have wondered, how much he was really doing as vice president. But I'm not here to say that. But yeah, he was a good player. Played a lot of golf, very passionate about it, and he hit a lot of balls. There were a lot of Secret Service agent out at Burning Tree many times with the vice president. But nice man. And he very passionate about the game for sure.
How about President Herbert Walker Bush, the elder Bush, right?
Yeah, fast player. Loved playing quickly.
Language. Was the profanity flying? Because I've heard that. I've got a story for you about him. Yeah, there was some of that, but it was really more of I want to get from A to B to C to Z as quickly as possible. It was let's move, let's play. I was very fortunate. He was good friends. Digger Phelps, former basketball coach at Notre Dame. President Bush put him in as what was called then the drug czar back when Digger retired. So I got to know Digger and played a caddy for Digger and President Bush. And just a really very likable man. And one who, the Walker family. I mean, the history of golf there. Just a really, really special guy. But I'll say this again. It's interesting about Burning Tree, Kevin. It's an understated place, and I think that's why. I think that's a big part of why my dad was there. He always treated, whether it was President Bush or a new member of the club, or someone working on the golf course, he tried to always treat them with great respect. You might treat the president certainly a little bit differently, but they were just there to play golf. It was all about the golf. Yeah.
It was about the golf. Yeah.
That's not the only place that's like, I'll give you some other examples of that. Yeah. Pine Valley is that way.
Yeah, I bet.
The country club in Brookline is that way. It's all about the golf. I mean, they're nice, the golf, but there's not a lot of extra stuff. And something is bigger than everyone. And that's the game and the history, especially at those places. Yeah. Same at Burning Tree. Is that about right?
Very much so. Yeah. Like when my dad retired, they had a huge party for him. Tip O'Neill was there, and just I can still remember that day and the way he was treated and the way he treated others. I mean, there was just such respect. But I think there was just always respect. One of the interesting things that they do at Burning Tree is at lunch. Again, it's not a very big clubhouse. But at lunch, the tables are not circular. They're long, rectangular type of tables, kind of communal almost. And the idea is very simply that you should sit together. You shouldn't sit at 4 or 5 at one table and 4 or 5 at the other. Everybody sit together, particularly new members coming into a club. It's a way to get to know the other members, to not be intimidated by someone who's a high figure in the government, what have you, or some doctor and so forth. It's a way to be comfortable in a place which is all about getting away from the rigors of what you're doing throughout the week. And that's, I think, something that also makes Burning Tree really, really special.
And that's the beauty of golf. As long as Harvey Penick said first, I repeat it all the time, if you golf, you're my friend.
Yeah.
Okay. And we have that. We have that in common. So even if we have differences, we have that. And that's what we focus on at the moment. I love places like that. Caddying for Lee Trevino. How did that come about?
So I was 18 years old. I had just, I was heading to the University of Richmond as a freshman in the summer of 1979. And for years, my dad was on the rules committee for the PGA of America, for the PGA Championship and the Masters, each for about 25 years. He was president of the PGA of America in the late 60s. So my summer vacation, Kevin, for years was the PGA Championship, wherever it was played. So in 1972 at Oakland Hills, we ended up staying at the same hotel as Trevino. I got to know Lee, became instant friends. And actually, when he won the PGA Championship at Tanglewood outside of Winston-Salem in 74, he was on the cover
Hold on.
Sports Illustrated.
Can I stop you
Yeah.
for a second? How do you become instant friends with Lee Trevino?
Yeah, I know. Right. I guess maybe that's a bit much. Through my dad and Lee were very close. And the primary reason is that Lee was a huge proponent of the PGA of America, and a lot of his peers, in the late 60s, early 70s, when the guys broke away and formed the PGA Tour, were not as big advocates. And the reason that Lee is because several PGA of America professionals in Texas really took Lee in, took good care of him, did everything they could to help him become a PGA member. My dad was someone like that. My dad was the president of the PGA of America at that time, and befriended Lee and treated him with great respect. Being of Hispanic heritage, it wasn't always easy for a guy like Lee Trevino at that time. And
he was picking balls up. He was the cart guy. Like the stories of him and Raymond Floyd are legendary. Like Raymond pulls up in a beautiful car. He's like, "Who am I playing today?" And Lee's like, "Me." And he's like, "What?"
He's like,
"Get out of here. This is going to be easy."
Yeah. I think, let me add something else. As a young white kid in suburban Maryland, caddying at Burning Tree, okay, with a lot of older African-American guys, that gave me, quite honestly, a perspective on things, Kevin, that maybe a lot of other kids my age didn't have. And that really helped form me in a lot of ways. So, and that's who my dad was. He was very open and always willing to help. So therefore, my dad wanting to help Lee Trevino become a PGA member meant the world to Lee Trevino. And so he and my dad were very close. And I just immediately had, I fell in love with the guy as a player, followed him, I had the official scorecard. I would keep score. I followed him every round of golf that he played.
Well, you should have, because he was so he was so good, and he was so entertaining.
Oh my God!
So how do you get on his bag at the Ryder? What happened to Herman? What was going on?
So think about this: a month before the PGA or the Ryder Cup, Lee calls my dad and says, "Max, my caddy Herman can't make the Ryder Cup." Now that statement in and of itself, in today's world, is completely preposterous. Anybody would say that. He said, "I want to have Kelly caddy for me." And my dad said, "Well, yeah, sure. Let me check." So again, I'm just starting school at the University of Richmond. So my dad goes home, tells my mom. My mom says, "Max, I don't know. He's just starting at Richmond." So, well, my sister Nancy, God love her, she finds out about this, and she calls my mom. She says, "Mother, for God's sake, if you deny him this opportunity, he'll never forgive you." And she's, in hindsight, probably right. So what ended up, I took a little pedal jumper from Richmond to White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, at the Greenbrier, where the 79 Ryder Cup was held. Got in there Thursday night, right? I was not there for any of the practice rounds, opening ceremonies, anything. And I'm on the bag with Lee Trevino playing in his first match Friday morning with Fuzzy Zeller. How good is that?
Oh, wait a minute.
With
this
Fuzzy.
Is the all personality team too.
It was awesome. They go out, they won that match. Now, what I remember, real quick, Kevin, it's one thing to caddy for members at Burning Tree Club. It's an entirely different scenario when you're caddying for one of the top players in the world, if not.
I know. So are you pooping your pants? What's going on?
I really was. I was. In fact, as I look back, I think I lost his 3-wood head cover at some point. I was really, really nervous. The one story that I like to tell early in that first match on that Friday morning, and by the way, there was no live TV. There was no I don't know that there was any TV coverage of Friday's matches. I think ABC had a couple of hours on Saturday and a couple of hours on Sunday. It was the first year that all of Europe came into the Ryder Cup. Jack Nicklaus had gone to Lord Derby the British PGA, and said, look, for the long-term health of this event, you got to bring all of Europeans becoming a global game. And he was right. So Trevino hits this drive. It ends up on a cart path. And it's kind of a rocky cart path. And he could have dropped it on either side. But if he drops it, it just kind of sinks down into some heavy rough. So he's looking it over, and he grabs the 6-iron out of the bag. And the crowd's murmuring, he's gonna hit it off the cart path. And he hits this 6-iron and it just shoots up in the air. Perfect trajectory, lands maybe, 20 feet, 15 feet from the hole. The crowd goes nuts. Again, I'm 18 years old. He hands me the club, and I'm thinking, this thing's got to be all ripped up. I look at the bottom of the club and not a nick on it. And I look at him, and he looks at me as if to say, come on, kid, I'm Lee Trevino. This is what I do, right? And we had so much fun. U.S. won that match. And it was the coolest thing. Now, the only thing it did, I wasn't able to get into the fraternity that I wanted to that year, but I got in the next year, so that worked out fine. But Lee was so cool. He was so.
Yeah. What about Fuzzy? Was he like? Who's this kid on your bag? Where did he come from?
Nah, they were very nice, but that really didn't factor. He was just the two of them, man. You talk about perfect kindred spirits playing off one another. Oh my Lord. Couldn't have been any better.
That's cool. Well, you've had a chance through just your experience in golf at the PGA of America. Well, let's talk about being the director of communications.
Yeah.
How did you get that job, and what was involved with it, and maybe what's your best experience doing that?
Yeah, the opportunity came up. A gentleman by the name of Terry McSweeney, who had been the head of communications for the PGA, essentially retired. He and his wife started a bed and breakfast in Ireland. And Terry recommended me because I had been the editor of PGA Magazine, the monthly publication that goes to the 29,000 golf professionals throughout the country. And it's the oldest continually published golf journal in the country. It dates back to 1920. And Terry recommended me for the job. He had gotten to know me. And it wasn't because I was Max Elbin's son. Maybe that had a little to do with it. I don't know. But I had worked out at PGA headquarters for a couple of years when I was with the magazine. It was being published in the Detroit area at the time. But Terry recommended me. I got it. I was good at it. I was a little nervous at the start, just like any other job. But, as the PGA took on more and more events, the importance of communications. And we had a guy, Joe Steranka, who was just a incredible leader of that, of the communications team. Joe went on to become the CEO of the PGA of America. But my responsibilities were varied, one of which was really cool. For about 9 years, I moderated the press conferences during the week of the PGA Championship. And then when the Ryder Cup was held in the States. So sitting next to Tiger and Phil and Rory and so forth was a really cool experience.
So were you the guy that, like, when they would come in, you would kind of ask an opening question, get them going, then open it up?
Yeah. Tiger Woods, ladies and gentlemen, joining us for the 2001 PGA Championship. This will be Tiger's whatever number of years playing, and then Tiger thoughts on the golf course, and then moderating the press conference. It was always fascinating when he was there. I mean, Kevin, it's one thing to have Mickelson, whatever, guys in their prime like that. The 30 minutes is typical what happens in those press conferences. And Phil and those guys were good, and the questions were good. But Tiger's a different level. It was a very, very high, intense 30 minutes. I could kind of understand, to tell you the truth, why he didn't. He was always famous for not really saying anything. He heard a lot of the same questions over and over. But that was, you talk about learning on the fly, and I was really good at it. I'm not one to boast necessarily, but I was good at it. You have to be, man, because you're on international television with the best players in the world, and you're trying to get questions asked, get them in and out in 30 minutes. And it was a lot of fun. There was certainly pressure there, but the first 2 years that I did it, Tiger won both years. So it was a very, very cool experience. And look, I'm a very lucky guy.
Did he make you nervous?
No, not at all. Always shook their hands. No, No, it never really made me nervous. I thought he was really good. I thought he was really cool. The best guy I ever sat next to in terms of just a human being by far is Bernhard Langer. There's no question. There's not even anybody who's close. But
Well, tell me that. Why? What about Bernhard?
He's just the classiest gentleman. There's nothing that he wouldn't answer. He gave of his time. He's just there's something special about him. He's a very spiritual guy. I'm not necessarily a religious or spirit. I'm more of a spiritual guy, but there's something about him that's at a higher level that I really appreciated. Not to take any knocks. I mean, Rory McIlroy, incredible guy. And I know Rory's been through a lot, but when I dealt with him, he was fantastic. And just, it was a cool thing, man. It was cool to be able to sit next to those guys and know that people were watching, but you had to be on your toes.
Yeah, and some asking questions, especially after listening to your interview of Tom Watson and your co-host on Musings on Golf. When Tom Watson came into the media room after blowing the British opener, it just didn't go his way, and he broke the ice. Really well, guys, it's not a funeral. All right, let's go. And Bob, your co-host, just said that made everybody feel a lot better, and then you could get into it. I'll never forget one time at the Deutsche Bank Championships, Jordan Spieth had lost in a playoff the week prior in New Jersey to Dustin Johnson, and he kind of messed up before the last hole and in the playoff. And I just asked him right away. I said, "Jordan, are you over it? And if so, how long did it take?" And he gave a big sigh and he said, "Yeah, I'm over it." But I just thought it was appropriate. Let's just go there right away, and then we can get to the rest of it. Do you like that style?
Yeah, I do. When Tiger lost to Y.E. Yang at Hazeltine, the first question that I asked him, I said, "Tiger, why did you lose today?" And I didn't have any fear of that. And somebody later on said, "Wow, that was a pretty gutsy question to ask." I said, "Well, that was the question." And he said, "I didn't make as many putts. Y.E. Yang made more putts than I did." I think, Kevin, at that point, that was the only time that Tiger had held a lead outright in a major or shared a lead going into the final round of a major championship and lost. So it was a big, big deal. And of all people, Y.E. Yang, let's just be honest, a relatively unknown guy who really hasn't done much since. But yeah, I've always been a guy, and I try to do that very much in our Musings on Golf podcast. I think that the end user, in that case, it was the media member, or in this case, now with our podcast, the listener. I think he or she, they want to know this information. They want to be able to be given the information from that person. Ask the question directly. It's okay. It's in a lot of ways you can say. It's just golf, and it sort of is, but it's also one professional talking to another. Tell me what happened.
Right. If you're going to go there eventually, you may as well go there immediately. Just do it with a good heart and be direct about it. And most people can handle it because you're just talking about something that happened. All right. Yeah. So it's really not that big of a deal. Musings on Golf. How did that come about? I mean, what were the goals in creating the show, and how's it going?
Quick background. It's going really well. Thank you. And going really well in terms of the the caliber of our guests. I mean, we've had, good Lord, who haven't we had? We've had Lee Trevino, Gary Player, and Bernhard Langer, and Tom Watson, Barbara Nicklaus, and Jim Nantz, just Hale Irwin and Lanny Watkins, and on and on. It's all about great storytelling. It isn't necessarily, Kevin, about what the live golf versus the PGA Tour. I don't think people want to talk about that. They don't. Not they don't want to talk. They can hear that so many other ways. I for about a year or two, I wrote a column every Monday on my Facebook page called My Monday Musings. And it was based after what Larry King did for years in USA Today, where Larry King would, in the style section of USA Today or the life section would have, if it's chocolate ice cream, count me in, ... If it's just talk to Liz Taylor, can't wait for her next movie, ... Well, I did a takeoff on that, and I expanded on a few subjects, and it was very well received. I mean, it was, a lot of people liked what I wrote. steered clear of politics, which I try to do in my daily life anyway. Focused obviously on sports because I was a sports reporter, so it's been in my blood for a long time. Movies, TV, and so forth. And Bob Bupka, Bob's a longtime golf, he's kind of the voice of golf, longtime radio guy. Bob's the guy you'd hear with Westwood One back in the day. Bob Bupka live at Winged Foot. Tiger Woods has just birdied the 13th hole to take the lead in the third round of the U.S. Open. Bob Bupka live at Winged Foot. So Bob, who I'd known through the PGA.
With a heavier New York accent. That was a very mid-Atlantic accent.
It wasn't very good. Right. He's such a proud
Bob Bupka.
He's such a proud Long Islander. Sag Harbor.
Yeah. Sounds the part.
God. Shinnecock, the whole deal. Yeah. Bob, he's fantastic. He calls me and says, look, this is really good. I've been doing a podcast with another guy on kind of wrapping up the tour. How about if we take what you're doing and create a podcast out of it? So we did. And Jim Nantz was our very first guest. I've known Jim a long time. He actually, Jim did the voiceover for the video for my dad after my dad had passed away that was shown at the PGA annual meeting. Jim's a member at Burning Tree. Jim was our first guest, and it was called Musings on Sports. And anytime you can get Jim Nantz to be your first guest, that gives you some instant credibility. We did that for about a year. It went well. We kind of, both Bob and I are golf guys. And so we said, let's just make it Musings on Golf. So it's every Tuesday. We post it. We typically will do an interview with the guest. Zach Johnson was our very first guest under Musings on Golf. At that time, obviously, with the U.S. Ryder Cup team captain. And Zach was great. And that gave us, again, credibility strictly on the golf side. It's been great. It runs about, half hour with the interview, and Bob and I do about 10, 15 minutes lead into that. So about 45 minutes every Tuesday. And it's growing. It needs to get bigger than it is. But as I mentioned, just the caliber of our guests. We just, if I may, real quick, Kevin, we just talked the other day to Rhett Evans, who is the CEO of the Golf Course Superintendents Association of America. And Rhett last month reached the summit of Mount Everest. And that 30-minute interview is in terms of inspiration and messaging from him, is some of the most powerful stuff I've ever heard. It's the most powerful stuff from any of our guests, but certainly incredibly inspirational to anybody, dealing with any type of issues, trying to overcome them. So great storytelling.
What were his issues? Let's get into that. We got a moment.
Yeah.
What was he trying to accomplish aside from it? It was a bucket list thing. What was?
Yeah. And by the way, you had asked me.
What was the spirit behind it?
Right. You had asked me about my goal, first of all, with Musings on Golf is just to be able to provide listeners who are passionate about the game of golf with an avenue to hear great storytelling from a wide range of subjects, if you will, in the game. People, whether they're players, officials, what have you. But Rhett, he's run he's competed in 4 Ironman triathlons. He's scaled a number of Mount Kilimanjaro, a number of mountains, but it was always his goal to go to Everest and climb. And he did it, but it sure as heck wasn't. It sure as heck wasn't easy. As a matter of fact, during the week that he reached the summit, 3 people died, and 2 of them he saw as they had passed away. And that's part of what made that interview really, really powerful. I'm impressed with people like that, because you asked it was a mission for him. He wasn't going to fail. He was going to get it done somehow. And his message very simply was, hey, if I could do this, there are lots of issues that people have in life. Just believe, prepare as best you can, persevere. You can get it done.
I'm looking forward to listening. I've liked all the ones that I've listened to thus far. And I like the contrast with the golf. Instead of the blow-by-blow of golf and everything, just the fact that somebody that's a superintendent that dreams about other things and does other things. When I hear golfers like Jack Nicklaus talk about fly fishing, I can't get enough of that, because now I see him in a different light.
Sure.
And because it can't just be golf all the time, but golf is the anchor of things. Tell me a great golf story, Kelly. That one that you've told over dinner before, over beverages, whatever it is, that always seems to get a great response from people.
I told that one about Trevino. Let me answer this. I'll think of it in a second, but I want to tell you one. You talk about golf being the anchor. One of the questions that we ask, Kevin, on Musings on Golf is, if our guest is, if you could have three people who you would play golf with, whether living or deceased, who would they be? Who would they, and where would you play? A lot. It's a question that's been asked, I'm sure, a lot, right? And so you get the answers I play with Jack and Arnold. We play at Pebble Beach and blah blah. Well, we had Scott Van Pelt on from ESPN, and Scott's, he was with Golf Channel for many years, very passionate about the game, and he was a great interview. And then when we got to that part of it, he got kind of emotional, which I think is, you learn a lot about people that way. And Scott said, well, my dad died when I was 21. And he said, I lost my dad, and then my stepdad and my grandfather I lost in like a 3 or 4 year span. And I could tell Bubka on the other side, he was tearing up, and he's telling this story about I would play with them at this 9-hole golf course in Lewis, Delaware, and we would grab a case of beer and go and play. And I thought that was one of the coolest things I'd heard when it came to my show. Now,
I remember that. That was beautiful. And I'll second that with when Tom Watson, you asked him the same question. He wanted to play with his dad and his brother at his home club, Kansas City Country Club. Played it hundreds of times, if not thousands, but it's just the nostalgia and the memories.
Yeah. And that's, I think for, the story that I've told, my dad, when he took the job at Burning Tree, he started, I said, in 1946. So here's I think is a classic golf story of that era. Okay. There's a guy named Lou Worsham who was the head professional at that time. And Lou was a really good player. But this was 1946, and there really wasn't a whole lot of money to be made. Lou went to the president of the club and said, I think I can play tour golf, and I think I can be good. And as my dad told me later, the president of the club kind of looked at Lou and said, you're crazy. There's no money to be made, but if that's what you want to do, go and do it. And my dad had been an assistant professional. He was elevated to the head professional position. Lou Worsham went on and won the U.S. Open. And then he went on to become the head professional at Oakmont after he got out of tour golf. And he and my dad stayed very good friends. As a matter of fact, when the U.S. Open was played up at Oakmont, I can still remember Lou. He had a house. They have I don't know if Bob Ford lived in that house. It's almost off the 18th green there. And Lou was growing tomatoes during the third round or during the course of the U.S. Open week. And my dad was just astounded. But Lou was just a good old country boy. And, they stayed great friends. But really because of Lou making that decision to want to go play at a time where there wasn't much money on tour. But it was a good decision for him. And it opened the opportunity for my dad to be there for the next 50 years.
That's incredible how just the sequence of events, if one thing changed, it changes the trajectory of everything. And I like the tomato story because you know what? Tomatoes don't taste like they used to.
They don't. That's true.
You need the backyard tomatoes. We got to bring the backyard tomato garden back into play.
Kevin, my dad grew backyard tomatoes for years in my, the home I grew up. And it's so true. Like he would tend to those. They were his backyard babies, man. He took such good care of them. And you're right. The taste of a delicious tomato, ripely, picked. Oh my gosh! To put that right on the table,
it's fantastic.
You can't beat it.
You put it in a salad. The stuff we have now. Don't get me started about watermelons. Remember when they were oblong and they were blood? Now they're like a basketball. They taste like nothing.
Nothing.
No, see,
correct.
It's a travesty what we've done with produce. Kelly Elbin is our guest. He is the host of Musings on Golf. Big thanks to him for joining us, and also a big thanks to the golf real estate pros from suncoastdreams.com, Vince Visicaro and Gene Walsh. If your dream is to live on a golf course or in a golf resort community in the Southwest Florida area, nobody better than those guys. Check them out at suncoastdreams.com or call 941-220-4000. And also a big thanks to Party Drinks, the title sponsors. If you're looking for a beverage on the golf course that's not a beer, not a drink named after the time of day, then Party is drink for you. Kelly, I told you I'd keep you for a half hour. We've gone over that. Sorry about. I have two questions left for you here.
Please, sure.
Tell me something. As a voice of golf, and I would say like a conscience of golf, having grown up in it, the game has changed a lot. There's music on the golf course. There's drinking on the golf course, which is good for my company and everything. But are you okay with that? Or are you more old school where you just play and there's silence and the only chatter is in between shots with your friends? Help me.
I'll answer that by saying both. So I'm a member at East Point Country Club here in Palm Beach Gardens, big 36-hole facility. Most of the guys I play with, there's music that's going on, and a lot of, Elton John stuff from the 70s that I love. So I'm super good with that. As a matter of fact, it's just now become the norm. And I was never, ever, Kevin, one who, when I went and played golf, that I had music, but I love it. Jimmy Buffett's playing, what have you. Now that's for recreational golf. In terms of tour golf, I mean, come on. I get it. I get the premise of live golf. I'm not really here to rip into them, but with the music blasting in the background, this is a professional level. No, it doesn't do it for me. It's very different. It's the same game, but it's very different. Again, that when my dad was president of the PGA of America, that's when the tour players at that time, Arnold, Jack, and Gardner Dickinson, some really tough guys at that time, broke away and formed what became the PGA Tour. So I can certainly relate to what's going on with live golf, and that you want it to be something different. I get it. But
it's not new. We've been down this road before. There are some fundamental differences, but it's largely the same.
It is. And with when my dad was the president of the PGA, television was coming along, and Roone Arledge and ABC were dangling a lot of money at these players, and understandably so. They had airtime they wanted to fill, the advertisers and so forth. And the guys, playing on tour felt like, hey, these older time club professionals, why are they the ones who are dictating where we can and where we can't play? And that eventually led to them moving away from the touring and forming the PGA Tour. Today, there's similarities. Yep. And you've heard this, man, they better get this figured out, because it is not good for the game. Look how exciting that was to see at the US Open, no matter who you were rooting for. And I wasn't rooting against Bryson DeChambeau. I was certainly rooting for Rory McIlroy, but life goes on. But it was compelling theater, and you need more of that. Golf is a niche sport at the elite level. There's only so many people who watch golf. And if you have it fractured, divided, and you have some really good players who aren't playing on the PGA Tour every week, it hurts the game.
Well, they're eventually going to merge. They have to. I mean, it's just a question of when. Probably the sooner the better. All right, final question for you here. This is the deepest one of all. Where would you be in life without golf?
Yeah, I would be a sports writer. I was. I was the statistician for the Washington Redskins radio network for 3 seasons. So to be able to sit next to Sam Huff and Sonny Jurgensen as a kid growing up, listening to them, and then sitting next to them doing stats. I was a sports reporter coming out of college. So I would have continued in sports in some capacity for sure. It's always been a passion of mine. I enjoy it. My Redskins, my Commanders, whatever you want to call them. It's been 30 years in a very bad location with a guy named Dan Snyder having owned them, but that's over. And the guy who owns your Sixers is now owning the team with Josh Harris, and hopefully that will begin to turn some things around. But yeah, I would definitely I'd be in sports in some way, but not necessarily golf, but definitely sports.
See, we have a lot in common. I knew we did. I knew you were interesting because we have the sports backgrounds. Now we're podcasters, but really more than anything, what connects us is golf. And that's the whole point of my show. And I think that's the whole point of your show. And when you can express your love for what golf has done for you and share good stories about people that we've come into contact with, I think that makes for compelling listening and watching. And I'm going to keep doing this until they kick me off the next format. We've already been kicked off YouTube, but we're going to get back on.
We got to get you back on there, man.
It's going to happen. We're working on it. Hey, Kelly, thanks for being my friend. Thanks for being a friend of golf. Thanks for all you do. Good luck with Musings on Golf. Tell Bob I said hi. I didn't ask you who's the bigger star of the show. You're both.
There's no question. I just set up Mr. Bupka and let him go.
Let him do his thing. Hey, man, you do your thing pretty good, too. All right, so let's call it a day. For Kelly Elbin, I'm Kevin Walsh. Hey, thanks to Party Drinks. Thanks to suncoastdreams.com. And thanks for everybody for listening. We'll see you again next time on It's Party Time, My Golf Story.
You've been listening to It's Party Time, My Golf Story, brought to you by Party Drinks. Classically designed golf drinks for golfers by golfers, and the golf real estate pros Gene Walsh and Vince Vizzacaro. For your Southwest Florida real estate needs, check them out at suncoastdreams.com or call 941-220-4000.
This is Vince Vizzacaro and Gene Walsh with the suncoastdreams.com real estate team at Fine Properties. We've helped hundreds of families find their dream homes in golf and resort communities in Lakewood Ranch, Bradenton, Sarasota, Parrish, Venice, and the surrounding areas.
Let us be your guides to finding your dream home here as well. Learn more at suncoastdreams.com or call us at 941-220-4000.